Welcome to Fantasy Football RX. Terry and Ron are here with their weekly dose of advice to help you build a winning FanDuel lineup. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. The doctors will see you now. Hello, fantasy football lovers. Welcome to Fantasy Football RX. I am Dr. Ron, and as you can tell, Dr. Terry is not with us this week. He's a little under the weather. So I will be going solo on this podcast this week, so hopefully I don't let you down. Terry, I hope you get to feeling better soon, and you're back next week with some great picks for us. Help us win $1 million. So get well soon, buddy. Hope I won't let you down this week on our show. So I'm sure you'll have a lot of things to say next week about some of the picks I've made. So I look forward to hearing that, and we'll get right into this week and hopefully get you guys some good picks. Talk about last week just a little bit. We had 5 of our suggestions ended up in the $1 million lineup, so we hope that our picks helped you guys win some money as well. And we're on to week 4 now. Lots of good games to choose from today, and I'm going to jump right in and see what we got for you guys. My game of the week that I'm going to start with is going to be Carolina at Dallas. It's a 52-point total. Dallas is a 4.5-point favorite. There's a lot of games to choose from. The reason I picked this game is I was looking at the number of plays per game per each team. And Carolina comes in at number 5 and Dallas comes in at number 3. So there are two teams that like to play fast. So I think that this could be a very high scoring game. I think it could go way over the 52-point total that they're posting. And that's why I picked this as my game of the week. So now we're going to jump into quarterbacks. And I'm going to start with my top choice here. And I'm going to give you my top 3 choices. I'm going to give you some other choices to consider. Since Terry's not here to give you picks, so I'm trying to give you a little more than what we normally pick. We usually pick about 3 players per position. So try to give you a little bit more so I give you some options going into the weekend. So my top play this week is Jalen Hurts at 7,900 versus Kansas City. Kansas City's given up 26.2 FanDuel points per game, which is the second most on the slate. Hurts has the rushing upside. Love him in this game. They played a bad game Monday night against Dallas. Got beat pretty bad. People may be seeing that. May be off Hurts a little bit. I'm not sure. I think he'll be high owned, to be honest with you, though, because he's got that rushing upside, which you always want. And at 7,900, I think he's a good price point and a good play for you this week against Kansas City, who, like I said, anytime you're playing Kansas City, you got to keep scoring because you don't know. Kansas City can come back so fast. So you got to keep trying to score as many points as you can. So no matter what the score is, Philadelphia will keep pushing and trying to score lots and lots of points. So Hurts is a great play at 7,900. My next play goes into my game of the week is Dak Prescott at 7,700 versus Carolina. People may look at Carolina's defense, and they're the top-rated defense right now in the league. But you have to look at who they've played so far. Context is everything. That's what my pastor says in church every week, and it's so true, and it's true of fantasy football too. So Carolina, number 1 ranked defense, but first 3 weeks they played the Jets, New Orleans, and Houston. And New Orleans, when they played them, were without 7 other offensive coaches and a couple players as well, I believe. So Carolina hasn't had a real test on defense yet. This will be their test this week. I think Dak Prescott will have a great game, 7,700. I think that the passing game is what's going to thrive for Dallas this week. They've been leaning on the running game the last couple weeks. I think this is the week they go back to the passing game. So I like Dak Prescott a lot. You can pair him up with Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. They're both great options for you. So if you want to do a game stack, those are some options for you at receiver for him. My next quarterback is cheap, going back to the well. Keep going there. Eventually, he's going to pay off for us. Matt Ryan. I know Terry's going to love that pick. $6,700 versus Washington. Washington's given up 27.7 FanDuel points per game, which is the most on the slate. Ryan's playing at home. He always plays better at home. He hasn't played well this season at all, but maybe this is the week he gets it together. I'm hoping it is. $6,700 is dirt cheap. So he could put up 27. He could put 30 plus points up, and that's what you want for your quarterback. And at 6,700, that allows you to pay up for some studs at other positions. So those are my three main quarterbacks that I like this week. Some other quarterbacks to consider is Patrick Mahomes in that Philadelphia-Kansas City game. Chiefs are 1-2. They need this win, and Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. He's 8,700. He's the most expensive quarterback on the slate. That may scare some people away from him. So he's a pivot off of Hurts. You can play Patrick Mahomes at 8,700. I like him a lot any week that he's playing because he can go off for 30 plus any week. And this may be the week. He may be the highest scoring quarterback in the week. But like I said, I like the other three ahead of him better right now. And then the other quarterback to consider is Sam Darnold in that Dallas Carolina game. He's 7,200 versus Dallas. Dallas has given up 19 explosive plays on the season, which is the most. An explosive play is any play of 20 plus yards down the field. So big plays possible for Carolina in this game. I think it's high scoring. It's a shootout. They both like to play fast. So Sam Darnold is probably going to be very low owned, and 7,200 is a good play. He's a very good value play for you. So those are the quarterbacks I have for you to think about. Let's go on to running back. My top running back this week is Derrick Henry, 10,200 versus the Jets. Fourth most FanDuel points given up a game to running backs is the Jets. There's Derrick Henry. A.J. Brown and Julio Jones are both questionable. So Derrick Henry, they're just going to keep feeding him the ball like they always do. He's a beast. He's unbelievable. So he could get 35 plus touches this game and go for 200 plus yards and 4 touchdowns. And that would really pay off for you at 10,200. So he does have to have a great game at that price point. I mean, if for him to pay off, he's going to have 30 plus points at at 10,200. So just keep that in mind if you do roster him. Next up is David Montgomery, $7,500 versus Detroit. I think people are not going to be on him this week. Detroit has given up 3 touchdowns on the ground and 3 touchdowns through the air, 2 running backs. Justin Fields, Andy Dalton. I'm not sure who's starting, but they're both banged up. I think they're going to lean on David Montgomery this week, and I think he's a great play for you at 7,500. I think he's going to be low owned, and he can go off and have a monster game as well. He did at the end of last year. He had a good game, first game against Rams. I think he went at 18 plus fantasy points. Last couple weeks hasn't done a whole lot, so people are going to be off him. I like him at 7,500. Next up is a very good value play for you is Nyheim Hines for Indianapolis. He's $5,300 versus Miami. Miami's given up the second most FanDuel points to running backs on the slate. He's been splitting time with Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor's questionable with a knee injury. If you're interested in Jonathan Taylor, he's 6,600. But I like Nyheim Hines at 5,300. He's got the receiving upside, and they've been splitting pretty close. I mean, on the season, he's at a 46% snap rate. In the last game, he had 56. He played 56% of the snaps. So he's getting a lot of play, and I like him a lot, especially with Taylor with a knee injury. You just never know. So he's a cheaper option at 5,300. I like him a lot in that game. And that game could be a sneaky shootout as well. Those teams like to play fast as well. So think about that as well as a sneaky little game there, the Indianapolis-Miami game. A couple other running backs for you to consider this week. Miles Sanders, 6,500 versus Kansas City. Kansas City's given up the third most FanDuel points per game on the slate. This could be a pivot off of Hurts because I think a lot of people are going to be on Hurts. Miles Sanders, I think he had 2 or 3 carries last game against Dallas. They were behind trying to chase, so he didn't get much opportunities, but he's a great back. 6,500. He could smash here at that price, so he's something to consider as well. Next up is Zach Moss, 6,000 versus Houston. They're 17-point favorites at home. They should just annihilate Houston. Shouldn't even be close. They're more of a pass app. They pass it 60% of the time, run it 40% of the time, but they get a big lead. They're probably just going to lean on Zach Moss to run it. He was a healthy scratch the first week of the season, but last 2 weeks he's played very well. He's averaging 15.5 FanDuel points per game at $6,000. He's a great value play for you as well this week. Next up is a 2 backs to consider. Same team, Trey Sermon, Eli Mitchell for San Francisco. Sermon's 5,900. Eli Mitchell's 5,600. They're playing Seattle. Seattle's given up the most FanDuel points to running backs on the season so far. I don't know who's playing this week. Sermon got the start last week. Eli Mitchell was out. Eli Mitchell's questionable with a shoulder injury. Not sure if he's going to play, but keep an eye on that. Sermon was a healthy scratch week 1. He played last week. Didn't do a whole lot, but he has a good opportunity this week. They're playing at home, 5,900. He's definitely, it depends on who's playing. If Eli Mitchell's playing, I would probably lean towards Eli Mitchell. But 2 good options at 56 and 5,900. Playing against Seattle, which, like I said, has given up the most FanDuel points. 2 running backs on the season so far. So those are some running backs for you to consider. And we will move on now to the wide receiver position. I tried to give you guys, let's see what we got for here receivers. We'll start off with our top receiver here, Davante Adams. He's my number 1 player this week as far as wide receivers go. 8,100 versus Pittsburgh. They've given up 5 touchdowns through the air so far. Adams had 18 targets last week. He's clearly, as we all know, always know, he's number one target for Aaron Rodgers. He feeds him constantly because he always wins the one-on-ones. He always gets open. He's a elite receiver. And so 8,100, I like him. He's my favorite receiver on the slate. I think he's the top scoring receiver for this week. My next receiver is back to Cooper Kupp, 8,600. You just can't ignore it. I mean, he's getting all these targets. They're playing Arizona, who's allowed 5 touchdowns through the air. It's going to be a high-scoring game, at least on paper. That's what they're saying for the total. He's Stafford's favorite target. He's 8,600, but he's averaging 26-plus points. He's number 1 wide receiver so far on the season by a pretty big margin. So he's been unbelievable. So I like him at 8,600. Like I said, until he gets stopped, until Matthew Stafford stops going to him, which he's not going to, just keep going. It's Cooper Kupp. So 8,600. If you can get Adams and Cooper Kupp in one of your lineups, I think you're going to be off to a good start. I mean, you have to pay down in a couple other places because it's hard to get 2 high-priced studs in at wide receiver, but you can do it. So there's ways to do it. So when I got some, a couple value plays I've given you at running back and a quarterback, and I'll get you some at tight end as well and defense. So you can possibly do that, and I think that'll help build a good lineup for you. Next up is to go with Matt Ryan is Calvin Ridley. 7,200 versus Washington. Washington's given up the most FanDuel points to wide receivers on the season so far in this slate. He's averaging almost 10 targets a game. His total air yards percentage is over 47%. And what that means is every time Ryan throws the ball, like all the times he's thrown the ball throughout the season, 47% of those yards are going towards Calvin Ridley. So he's clearly the number 1 target there. Hasn't had the breakout game yet, but Terry, this may be the week. So hopefully this is the week that Ridley goes off. He's only got 1 touchdown on the season. This could be his week to go off. So 7,200, he's a good value play for you guys. Now we got to get some cheaper plays because I've been naming all these studs. Next up is Robbie Anderson, 5,700 versus Dallas. Once again, like I said, Dallas has given up 19 explosive plays to the wide receivers on this season. Those are plays of 20-plus yards. Anderson hasn't done a whole lot so far this season. DJ Moore has been the number 1 target for Sam Darnold. But I think this is the week Ryan Anderson goes off. I think he has a huge week this week, and at 5,700, that's the type of player that can get you, help you win $1 million. So think about him. I like that game a lot. Like I said, obviously, I keep mentioning players from that game. So that's a good game you can stack up. And like I said, you can go to DJ Moore as well. He's been the number 1 target for Darnold. He's 7,300. So if you're interested in him. But you need cost savings, go to Robbie Anderson at 5,700. Some other wide receivers for you to think about for this week. Terry's going to love this one. I love this one. Odell Beckham Jr., 6,600 versus Minnesota. He got 9 targets last week, his first game of the season. He looked great, looked very explosive. Minnesota's given up the 3rd most FanDuel points, 2 wide receivers on the slate. I think he's a good play at 6,600. For that price point, what he could do, a couple big plays, and like I said, he's really paid off for you, and he can do that. And Mayfield's going to target him. Jarvis Landry's still out with an injury, so he's going to be the number 1 target for Mayfield this week. Next up, if you want to pivot off of Cooper Kupp and you need to save some money, look to Robert Woods at 6,200 versus Arizona. He's gonna get his 1 week. This could be the week. We're in week 4. He hasn't done much on the season so far, but 6,200. If you can't afford to pay for Kupp and you need a little cost savings at 6,200, I think Woods is a good option. Going to be low owned because he hasn't done much, and that's when you want to get him. Buy low. So I think that Robert Woods could be a great option for you guys. Another guy to think about in Atlanta is Cordero Patterson. He's an interesting play. He's $6,000. But the interesting thing with him on FanDuel is you can roster him in the running back or the wide receiver position. So it gives you a lot of flexibility there. But he's only playing 36% of the snaps. So he's not out there a lot. But when he's out there, he's taking advantage of his opportunities. Last 2 weeks, he's gotten 7 carries and 7 targets. And he's averaging over 14 fantasy points per game. So when he's getting his opportunities, he's taking advantage of it. So he's only $6,000. So that's someone you may want to think about. You can pair him up with Matt Ryan. You can do a double stack. Matt Ryan, Calvin Ridley, and Cordero Patterson if you like. So think about that. Those are like 6 wide receivers, or actually 7 wide receivers that you can consider for this week. And I think they all have potential to be your top. I think they could be the top receivers of the week for you. So of course, why wouldn't I pick them? I'm going to give you the bad players. So anyway, those are some more receivers to think about. I really wish Terry was here because he'd be making fun of me because all this gibberish that I'm talking about right now. So, but let's move on to tight end. I got a few tight ends for you to think about. And as you know, number 1 is Travis Kelce. 8,200 versus Philadelphia. He's averaging 19 fantasy points per game. The next on the slate is Hawkinson with just over 13. So 13 fantasy points per game. Travis Kelce's a stud. You can play him every week. He's so expensive, though. He's 8,200. So you're going to have to play some of those value plays to get to Kelce. But he's always a great play every week. Every week he's on the slate. You can play him. And, a lot of people try to pay down for tight end. And you got to get lucky. You got to find the guys that get the touchdowns at tight end for them to pay off. And Kelce can get there without touchdowns because he gets so many targets and yards. So that's why he's so expensive. So you're paying for that, but you get what you pay for, and I think he's worth that investment, 8,200. A couple cheaper options to think about. Noah Fant, 5,700 versus Baltimore. Baltimore's giving up 17.5 FanDuel points per game to tight ends, which is the most on the slate. So he's a good target for Bridgewater, 5,700. Get in the end zone for you. Like I said, Baltimore's been weak against the tight ends, which last week I was loaded up on Hawkinson. He did nothing. Thank you, TJ Hawkinson. But anyway, I digress. So Fant could have a really big game against Baltimore this week. Logan Thomas is my next one. 5,800 versus Atlanta. 3 touchdowns allowed on the year to tight ends for Atlanta. Logan Thomas is a target, red zone target for Heineke, I don't know how to pronounce it, for Washington. Could end up being a high-scoring game. I like Logan Thomas at 5,800. I have a couple other tight ends I'll talk about here in a couple minutes, but those are the 3 main tight ends that I'm focused on for this week. And then I'll go to defenses, and then we'll get a couple more plays for you guys. My number 1 defense this week, there's several defenses you can pay up for. Buffalo at 5,000 is your top defense. They're playing Houston. Can't go wrong paying for them. You don't think? They should blow them out, 17-point favorites. That means Houston's going to have to be chasing, so you could get some pick sixes. So Buffalo at 5,000 is a great play. Right below them is Tennessee at 4,900, who's playing the Jets. The Jets have allowed 15 sacks, thrown 7 interceptions. So I'm not as big on the Tennessee, but I had to throw it out there because the Jets have given up the most sacks and thrown the most interceptions. So they're 4,900. But I'm not crazy about the Tennessee defense, but I wanted to mention them because of the potential for the turnovers, like with the sacks and the interceptions thrown. So next up this is going to hurt me to say this, but actually, no, I got another one for that. As Chicago, 4,500 versus Detroit. Chicago, 4,500 versus Detroit. They're playing at home. They've had 11 sacks on the season, 3 interceptions. Detroit has given up 8 sacks and thrown 3 interceptions. So Chicago could be a good play at home at 4,500. A little bit cheaper there. The next one's the one I'm talking about that's going to hurt me. So I got the Browns hat on here. Big Browns fan. I know Terry's going to hate this pick, but I got to mention them because they're cheap. Minnesota, $3,500 versus Cleveland. Cleveland's offensive line has not been as good as I had hoped and expected them to be so far. Hopefully they get that rectified this week, and I am wrong with this. But I got to mention Minnesota at 3,500. They've got 10 sacks on the season and 2 interceptions, and Cleveland's given up 9 sacks and thrown 2 interceptions. So, do with it what you want. So Minnesota 3,500. I'm probably not going to play them because as a Browns fan, I just don't have the heart to do it. But I had to mention that to you guys, trying to give you guys some decent plays or great plays to help you win $1 million. Decent plays aren't going to help you win $1 million. The next one I have is bottom of the barrel, New York Jets, $3,000 versus Tennessee. This is why I don't like Tennessee a whole lot. This is my upset pick of the week. I think New York Jets are going to beat Tennessee. $3,000 is the bare minimum. Tennessee's allowed 10 sacks, thrown 3 interceptions. I think the Jets upset them, and I still like Henry as a play, but I think the Jets get the win this week at $3,000. So those are my defenses. Let me talk about a couple of other picks for you. My Pepto picks that I have is 3 players. I have 1 receiver and 2 tight ends. I'll tell you the players and I'll talk about them. I have Devontae Parker, 5,400 versus Indianapolis. I have Pat Freiermuth, $5,000 versus Green Bay. I apologize if I pronounced that wrong. And Eric Ebron for Pittsburgh, 4,400 versus Green Bay. So Devontae Parker, 5,400 versus Indy. Indy's allowed 7 touchdowns to wide receivers through the air so far this season. Parker's getting 39% of the total air yards percentage. He's got no touchdowns so far. He's due for a big game. The Indy-Miami game could be a shootout. It's a low total, but I think it hits the over. And I think Devontae Parker has a big game, 5,400. So think about him, and he's going to be low owned for sure because nobody's going to be looking at that game. The next 2 are from the same team, so it's an either or. They're both dart throws, but their tight ends are cheap. Pat Freiermuth, 5,000 versus Green Bay. Green Bay is giving up the 3rd most FanDuel points, 2 tight ends on the season. He's had 9 targets. He has had 9 targets in the last 2 games. So he's an option for you there. He's 5,000. Even cheaper is Eric Ebron, 4,400. He's done nothing on the season, but he had a good. Last year he did pretty good for Pittsburgh. So he's at the bottom. He's 4,400. Once again, playing Green Bay. He's played 49% of the snaps on the season, so he's playing. He's got 1 catch on the year. So could this be the week he goes off? If it is, and you play him, you hit the jackpot there. So, but it's definitely a dart throw. He could easily put up a 0. So keep that in mind if you roster him. He's $4,400 though, so dirt cheap. And FanDuel is running a thing this week. If you roster the lowest price player that scores a touchdown, they're going to split $100,000 for everybody who rostered that player. And Eric Ebron could be that guy at 4,400. So just keep that in mind. So if you want to play one lineup with him, best of luck to you. But he could also very easily put up a 0. So keep that in mind as well. I have a cardiac stack for you. Then I'll let you go for the week and hopefully get you guys lineups built to win $1 million. My cardiac stack, Terry is going to love this one. I wish he was here to hear it because it is awesome. Here we go. The New York Jets. Zach Wilson, 6,400. Corey Davis, 5,700. Jamison Crowder, 5,500. Jamison Crowder's questionable with a groin, but head coach Salas said that he thinks he's going to play this week. So keep that in mind. Check before the game start. You'll know 90 minutes before if he's playing or not, but it sounds like he's good to go this week. Zach Wilson, 6,400. Like I said, the first 3 games, he's been terrible, but he's played against the 1st, 2nd, and 5th ranked defenses so far in the year. So he's had a tough start, tough way to start your career, especially, rookie, just thrown into the fire. I think he gets it going this week. He has the rushing upside. Corey Davis has been his number 1 target so far. He's 5,700. And like I said, Crowder hasn't played yet this season. Crowder is a reception monster out of the slot, 5,500. I think he's a good play. People aren't going to be on him because he hasn't played so far this year. People are worried about playing him with a questionable tag with the groin. So I'm not concerned about that. But you can either do just Zach Wilson with Corey Davis alone, or Zach Wilson with Corey Davis and Jamison Crowder, or just Jamison Crowder. So you can do a mixture, however you want to do it, however you feel comfortable. But those are low-priced players that are going to save you some money, and no one's going to own them. And I think he goes off, and I think it's the upset of the week, Jets over Tennessee. So we'll see how I do with that next week. Those are the picks I have for you guys this week. I hope that you guys like what you heard, and hope you can build some great lineups with it. I hope it gives you enough value plays to help you build with some studs there. I think that's the way to go, with some stars stars and scrubs this week, some really high-priced players and some low-priced players. Hopefully that helps you build a great lineup and win. Thank you so much for watching, and we hope to have Terry back next week. Hopefully he's getting a lot better, and he's back next week to critique my picks for this week. I know he's going to have a lot to say about them. So get well, Terry. We missed you, and hopefully next week you'll be back with us. Thanks for watching. Best of luck to you guys. We'll see you next week. Bye.